Hi everyone, I'm Perry. Welcome Mr. Eddie Stone, founder and CEO of Touchstone Essentials. Hello Eddie, how are you?
I'm doing great, Perry. How are you this evening, or morning, I should say?
Yeah, morning. I'm great, thank you.
Good, good. You're looking fresh, right? You've got the luxury
Yeah.
of doing this fresh in the morning, and I'm here at the end of the night, and I'm looking at the screen, and I realize I'm blending in with the the wood tone in my office. So I promise I'm not that red. But anyway,
Uh-huh.
sometimes they say the camera makes you skinny or it makes you heavy, and tonight it makes me look like I'm red. So
Uh-huh.
anyway, we'll be all right.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on our show again, Eddie. And I have a question here from Thai people. Okay, a
Sure.
lady, she's asking about weight loss coffee and the non-dairy creamer. Is it safe? I mean, is it effective too in the same time? Because from the last show we talked about controlling addiction of sugar, right? So instead of
Right.
taking sugars, she will take like creamer instead. Is it okay?
Well, so when we think about coffee, and coffee is popular when people are trying to lose weight, because caffeine does two things that if I'm trying to lose weight are helpful. One is it stimulates my metabolism. Now it's a temporary stimulation, but if I have coffee in the morning and maybe I have some in the afternoon, right, I would have a little more metabolism that's been stimulated, right? So my body heat would go up, and the caffeine itself is a stimulant. And so from a technical standpoint, now, everybody is a little different chemistry wise, but we would sort of assume they would burn a few more calories. So that's sort of one side of it. In the same way we think of things like fiber, if I have a high fiber diet, it moves food through my body more quickly. And so we get into something that's called caloric waste, meaning the average person has a transit time from when they eat and something leaves the body of about 48 hours under normal circumstances. If I'm unhealthy and I don't have a good healthy diet with fiber, that might be 56, 64 hours. That's not a good thing. And it means you're getting additional calories as that food sort of moves through the system. People have a tendency to think if I put all the calories in my belly at once, it all disperses, but that's not true. You're still taking in calories through the digestive tract. And so if I have high fiber, I move it through, say, 36 hours, I can probably enjoy about a 10% caloric waste. So if I ate 1,000 calories, probably only 900 calories impact me. So I don't mean to get off track from coffee, but I'm just trying to give some comparisons. With something like coffee and caffeine, it's as a dual function. One, it can increase temporarily your metabolism. But the second thing is, in most cases, coffee would help to suppress the appetite some. And so, for example, if a person found themselves hungry in between meals, they can drink some water, and some coffee, and most likely their hunger pain would go away, because caffeine tends to sort of slow down the appetite, at least in a temporary basis. In the case of what most people do, unfortunately, this is not a good idea. They'll load their coffee up with cream as well as sugar, right? And so now they're getting fat from the cream. It's a very saturated fat. And they're getting sugar, which we know is not a good plan. We talked about it last time in terms of trying to lose weight. So for your friend, if your friend has been accustomed to drinking coffee with sugar, so if she can leave out the sugar, that's a great idea. My challenge is with a non-dairy creamer. Number one, I'm not a big fan of cream in coffee because of just the saturated fat and the dairy fat. But on the other side, I'm not a fan of non-dairy creamers because by their very nature, they're going to be artificial. They're probably going to have an artificial sweetener to them, an artificial color, and an artificial flavor. And of course, anybody that watches our show knows I'm just not a fan of ultra-processed foods and artificial sweeteners and colors and things of this kind. They tend to negatively impact the hormones in the body. They can throw them out of balance. This makes losing weight super difficult, right? And so if they can learn to drink the coffee black, that's really what you want to try to do. Even if to get used to it, if she's been putting, say, 2 teaspoons of sugar, maybe she tries 1 teaspoon of sugar to sort of wean herself off of the sugar, because I don't believe ultimately for long-term health goals, having a non-dairy creamer substitute is really a good idea. I just, if we're trying to say drive ourselves, taking a long arc, right? Got to think about this in long term, then I don't believe that's a good idea. But if she's trying to save calories, most likely the non-dairy creamer is going to have less calories than a dairy creamer. And so that's a little bit of a long, complicated answer, but it's not a simple thing, right? People need to think about, what are my long-term health goals? It isn't just controlling my weight. It's controlling my blood pressure. It's anti-aging. There's just a lot of dynamics I wish for people to think about.
Here in Thailand, Eddie, there are so many products, to lose weight, to get people slim, especially coffee is been advertising for a long, long time. And I don't really know that it really works, and.
Yeah, I see a lot of coffee products that are for weight loss. And I do wonder sort of the long-term effects. I'm kind of like you. I'm a little skeptical because a lot of times the coffee will not only have a concentration of caffeine, but it'll have other types of stimulants like yerba mate or whatever they come up with, Garcinia. And so you can overstimulate the system. And when you do that and you throw the system out of balance, one, it can build a dependency on those stimulants. So once you stop using them, your appetite can go the other way, right? You can have an over interest in eating and your metabolism can actually crash. We like for people to take a moderate approach, right? And so I don't just use the coffee, but I'm walking or I'm moving or I'm trying to do some exercise and I'm trying to improve my diet. I think where these coffee drinks come from are people want to lose weight overnight.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to go to the beach this weekend. So the next 3 days, they're going to starve themselves and drink coffee and try to lose weight. Well, all they're really going to do is dehydrate themselves like a raisin, instead of a grape.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just not good long-term. So I see it all the time, but it's interesting. It's like less than 5% of people maintain weight loss for a 2-year period of time. And I think even 1 year, it's like only like 11 or 12%. I don't remember the exact percentages, but I'm not very far off there. And so I say to people all the time, because they'll call me and I'll say, well, are you trying to just dehydrate yourself for next weekend? Or are you trying to do something long term? And you got to think about those things and just find out what's important to a person, because I don't have very many temporary solutions. For me, I try to think of things as this long arc of where we're trying to get to making subtle changes. If I needed to lose 25 pounds, I would think of that as being a year plus project. If I wanted to lose it in a healthy way and have a good chance of keeping it off. For somebody who says, I need to lose 25 pounds in 90 days, they could probably starve themselves and do that, right? They could do some tricks, take some laxatives, do some crazy, unhealthy things like that. But after the 90 days and they reach their goal, they're going to gain that weight back and probably more. And so you might just ask your friend, hey, what's the long-term goal here? And how can you develop habits that will support sort of a long-term healthy body weight?
To share from my experience, I think the best, not the best for me to lose weight, to control weight, it's like to eat less meat or stop eating meat, it's like stable, the weight becomes stable. And
yeah. I think there's a lot to that, because people, let's set aside for a moment the debate between animal protein and plant protein. Let's set that debate aside, because in that debate, we could talk about sustainability, animal cruelty. There's just a lot of things we could speak to, but let's set that aside and just think about it this way. Animal protein, sort of on a per ounce basis in general, is going to have more calories because it's going to come with, at least if it's non-fish, a saturated fat constituent, right? So anywhere from, well, if you bought lean hamburger meat, maybe you can get 5 or 10% saturated fat. That's still considerable amount. If you had, let's say, fast food type hamburger meat, that's probably 85 to say maybe even, so you said 15% saturated fat to say 20% saturated fat would be about 85 to say 80% meat. And so that's just the big thing about it. So exactly what you just said, just by changing that. And I don't know if you happened to catch a live I did last week. I did a live on our corporate Facebook page with a young man named Matt Heatherton. And he is a world ping pong champion. And he's one of our influencers. He's from New Zealand, now lives here in the United States. And he's been working with us for quite a few years. And he's an autoimmune athlete, meaning he's had to overcome some really difficult autoimmune issues, bowel-based issues, IBS, all these types. It's got a great story. And he tells in the live, he talks about the moment that he reduced the percentage of animal protein in his diet and replaced it with plant protein, the difference it made in this chronic disease. You can't cure his disease, but he could manage his disease. And the ability that gave him to really better control his weight, sleep better, which helped his immune system. And so it's a great live. If you go to the Touchstone Essentials Facebook page, how on the left side there, it says videos, and it's kind of a video library. And it's Matt Heatherton's young man, and you'll see him, he's got a hat on and a dual screen with me on the little thumbnail, and just a great kid. And so that will help people also understand the role of animal-based proteins and diet and health.
Yeah, that would be great. So today we are going to talk about gut-brain connection, right?
We are. So, and the reason somebody probably sees that title or hears us say that, and they're like, oh, it's not the most sexy subject, but it's actually really critical. And it's really critical in this moment as we've sort of, since the world has sort of been engulfed with these issues and concerns about the coronavirus, and particularly its impact on respiratory health and disease. People are really, if you look at Google searches and stuff, people are really thinking about lung health issues. What can I do? What can I take? And we've been speaking about respiratory health, but one of the things that people don't associate with having an impact on your respiratory health as well as your immune system overall is your gut. And so the gut is often called the second brain, which kind of sounds a little odd for people. And then the other thing the gut does is it has an impact on mood much more than people realize. In fact, more than your brain has an impact on your mood. And that's kind of hard for people to sort of digest. So here's a couple things for you to think about. In your gut, there's a network of microbials or microbes. In your digestive tract, there's probably close to 400 trillion, right? It's a huge, huge number. And in your gut lining, there's anywhere from 90 to say 110 million different nerves and networks of receptor sites that really create this sort of communication system between your gut and your brain, and really even the sympathetic nerve system impacting heart, lungs, and all these things that we're talking about. And so where we sort of learned about this was years ago, 10, 15 years ago, when we sequenced the human genome. One of the things that they realized was when they were testing human genome, that most of the DNA they were testing on human beings was not human DNA. It was actually microorganisms.
Oh.
And so for people that have ever heard of the human biome is sort of this description of the community of microorganisms that live in your body. And it's really hard for people to think about this. My own mom, really, when I've talked to her about this, she has a really hard time thinking about the fact that if she looks at herself, that only about 15% of her mass is really human DNA, and about 85% of the mass are these microorganisms that live in concert with us. And so they have an intimate relationship in the body, and it's important because without them, we can't survive. And these microorganisms in the gut and digestive system, the way that they impact the body, and we're talking about things that live in the small, large intestine, just all throughout in your belly, these places, is they control the production of things like serotonin and other chemicals that affect your mood. And so the way things happen is if your gut is healthy, the amount of serotonin that it's producing is at a healthy level. Now, if your gut's not healthy, the amount of serotonin that it's producing is going to be at a diminished level. And so it actually can position you to be in a bad mood or in an unhealthy state of mind, and contribute to things like leaky gut and other factors that, kind of come into play here as we're having this discussion. And here's this other thing that makes a very interesting dynamic. If you're stressed or in a bad frame of mind, it negatively impacts the health of those microorganisms in your gut. And so their production of serotonin actually will drop. And so it's this relationship that's really interesting, that has to have balance, because you can sort of imagine that if I'm my gut's unhealthy and it causes me to be in a bad mood, which creates stress, which leads to my gut being unhealthy, people can actually spiral from a digestive and a gut health standpoint, as well as their mood, even to the point where some research has said it can trigger people having feelings or suicidal thoughts. And so not only can it manifest itself into gas and bloating, chronic fatigue, constipation, all these kinds of things, it actually can affect your mood disorders. And when they have done autopsies on individuals that have killed themselves, they found that their levels of serotonin are lower than what they should be. And they often have a history of poor gut health. So it's a very vicious cycle that, we don't have good solid answers for. And so it's challenging, except to say that anything you and I can do, anybody listening to us, anything they can do to think about their gut health and think about it as impacting more than just their physical health, but impacting also their mental health, just like a good diet in general impacts your mental health and how you feel about yourself. This is another reason to find motivation to take that extra step towards sort of this body health, mind health, and we could also talk about soul, right? Mind, body, soul. And so when I speak to people and I talk about things, so here's what so this is going to sound a little odd, right? When you eat, you're not just eating for the calories and the energy. You have to make yourself think about, I'm eating for those microorganisms that live in my body. So I'm eating for trillions, right? It's really an odd way to think about it. But if you think about it that way, so think about, what do they live on, right? Because they don't really live very effectively on fast food or artificial sweeteners or sugars, all these things we talk about when we talk about sort of the ills and the poisons associated with ultra processed foods, right? That's why it isn't just that it breaks down your physical health, it breaks down your mental health as well, which can then impact your motivation. Then there's this the whole cycle that people kind of get down into that's terrible. And so when we talk about eating plant fats as opposed to animal fats, plant proteins as opposed to animal proteins, one of the advantages there is the cellulose in plants, the fiber in plants, your microorganisms live off those. They get almost no nutrition from animal proteins. And so that's why people can often feel better by, if they're not capable and don't want to eliminate all animal proteins, if they just can change the mix so there's more plant-based proteins, most people will feel better, literally feel better about themselves and be in a better mood. It's just kind of remarkable how these things work together. Antioxidant rich foods, and so I'm talking about, fruits and vegetables, but not the green tea, cold pressed olive oil, dark chocolate, right? Everybody loves chocolate, right? These are things that those antioxidants, the polyphenols found in those substances also feed those microorganisms. Fiber that I mentioned, a high fiber diet, and I'm not talking about just taking a fiber supplement. I know in Thailand, because I've done some of the research, in a lot of Asia, it's very popular to take a fiber supplement. Nothing wrong with that, but you can't get away from the fact that the body also needs native fibers found in plants, fruits, and vegetables, and nuts. So these are good places to get that. And then fermented foods. So I don't know what a popular fermented food in Thailand is, but miso from Japan, kimchi from Korea, I think sauerkrauts, we sort of think of the Germans as being really into sauerkraut. Those are all fermented foods that essentially they're pre-digested. And so they're easier for those microorganisms to consume. We actually have a fermented rice in our protein product because oftentimes vegetarian protein products can be difficult to digest. Well, by using a pre-digested fermented rice, we sort of eliminate those problems. Plus, it tastes better. It doesn't have that chalky taste or anything on the after side. And then the other side is, thinking about the physical disposition of all this, but also mental, right? So meditation, walks, cold water stimulation, cold showers, things of this line, they actually stimulate the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is this really interesting part of your central nervous system that it's kind of this communication highway between the brain, the lungs, the heart, the gut, the whole system. And when you have a poor diet and you're in a poor mood, the vagus nerves tone, that's how they refer to it, really that's sort of indicating activity is diminished, and you're not as healthy and you're not as happy. But people who sing, people who take cold showers, I think a few shows ago we talked about people plunging in really icy cold water stimulates the vagus nerve, exercise in general, and even socializing, spending time with family and friends. Probably a lot of people during the pandemic here that they've missed that socialization with their friends and family because they're at home, and so it's really negatively impacted their mood. And so it's one of those things. And so here's, as we close up, here's something. So someone from the last show or 2 shows ago, I can't remember which, and I apologize, I didn't address this on the last show. They direct messaged me about one of our products that may positively impact both your immune system as well as your gut. We have a very specific product for this. And if you don't like ours for whatever reason, just find something with this combination. But we've got a product called Super Greens Plus D. Mm-hmm. And that product has greens as well as pro and prebiotics that feed the microorganisms in the gut. And it's a variety of probiotics, so different types, spore former, non-spore former. So it's really terrific in how it sort of addresses the microorganisms of the gut, but also bearing in mind that the vitamin D actually improves the function of the immune system, the innate immune system. So the way your immune system works is you've got sort of 2 sides of it. You've got your innate immune system, which is really where your natural killer cells come into play, and your macrophages. These are sort of like, think of them like frontline soldiers that are looking for pathogens that enter the body. And when they see them, they react quickly. This is why, even though we're exposed to a lot of germs on a daily basis, we don't get sick all the time, particularly if our immune system's healthy, because these pathogens, when they're spotted by the macrophages and natural killer cells, they surround them, engulf them, and kill them right before they can spread throughout the body, replicate, and cause damage. There's a second line of defense. And for people that are familiar with what's called the adaptive immune system, so this is the T cells and the B cells. So think of that as that secondary line of tanks and other things sort of waiting if there's a battle. And I use the metaphor of military and battle because that's exactly what your immune system is. I mean, it is a war when a pathogen enters the body. And of course, we know the stakes are very high. Some people's immune systems are compromised and they get sick and they die. Even things like cancer, if your immune system properly recognizes at the innate level, that front line defense, cancer as an active pathogen is in all of our bodies at some level, but our immune systems take care of it, squash it down. But when it gets out of hand, then you call on the adaptive system. When the adaptive system doesn't work, now we're in trouble, right? We go to the doctor and we have to get outside help. And so Super Greens Plus D is a product that was built to support healthy gut and healthy immune function. That isn't to say it's the only product in the whole world that does that, but I think it is a very powerful, brilliant combination at a great price. And so I was asked to talk about that before and did not. So I thought it might fit nicely in with our discussion of that second brain in the gut. And I realized for those watching us, I've throwing a little bit at you today, a little bit about the internal chemistry of the body, but maybe listen to this twice, because it's important to get a handle on this and just recognize that these discussions we have about trying to eat less ultra-processed foods and more native produce, fruits, vegetables, and things of this kind that support your immune system, it's critical for total health, not just physically, but mentally.
Mm-hmm. Eddie, and how about the coffee enema that helps to clean the gut too or not?
You know, I'm not terribly convinced that the coffee enema does much more than help a person cleanse their bowel. There's just not strong clinical evidence to suggest that it has a deep impact on the gut function. Now, I'm not trying to say it's a bad idea, but I think it's limited in scope. And so it can help people, particularly that struggle to really go to the bathroom and clean themselves out. It can help to stimulate the bowel function and clean them out. But beyond that, I'm not confident what the rest of the impact is. I think it's kind of a temporary impact on the bowel. And maybe that could be important for someone because they just don't go to the bathroom like they should. And we may get some emails about this, but that's sort of what I know about it, and happy to have myself educated if somebody's got some clinical research to support it going beyond a temporary impact.
Mm-hmm. So I would say we should, take your super green D plus D because that helps to boosting immune system, right?
Yeah. So it doesn't boost, it helps to balance and support, right? It's a real different. You don't want to stimulate the immune system. You want to help it find its balance and harmony. And so when you consider that vitamin D, for example, some estimates are that 80% of the global population is deficient in vitamin D, and another heavy percent just is at a dangerous low level of vitamin D. So getting vitamin D is important. You think about what's going on during the pandemic, let's go back to that. Most people's vitamin D production is going to come from exposure to the sun. And you don't need, if you're a fairly young person, particularly if your torso can also get some sun, your legs and your arms, you probably only need, say, 20, 30 minutes of exposure to the sun. But as you get older and the skin gets thinner, or if you're a person of color, so Caucasians process synthesize sun into vitamin D much more easily than, say, anybody with color because of the melanin in the skin, which is a protective mechanism, right? That's why people of color with melanin are less likely to get skin cancer, right? So there's this yin and yang to this dynamic. Now all these people inside from the pandemic, there's probably a whole host of individuals that have lower vitamin D levels than they really should. And so that's supplementing, and you can supplement with food, right? Deep green leafy vegetables, nuts, I think it's walnuts, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot of places to look for it. So we get ours from mushrooms. So we have organic mushrooms that are grown for us in a organic medium. Mm-hmm. And that whole mushroom is what makes up the compound. When those are harvested, they're flipped over so the gills are exposed to the sun for about 20 minutes, and it produces vitamin D just like we do. Mm-hmm. A very, very same thing, which I've always found sort of fascinating to think about mushrooms. And so that's how our Super Greens Plus D has 2,000 IUs of vitamin D2, different from D3, which comes from animal generally, in each serving. And so that would give a person on a daily basis, almost any person, at 2,000 IUs a day would serve them, help to build up their levels if they're using it on a daily basis, which is what it's intended to do. Mm. And so it's our most popular product after the Pure Body Extra.
Your company also has protein plant-based too, right? So if you want to take how many times a day, how many meals a day should we take, with the plant-based protein with the Super Plus D for our health?
Well, I wouldn't want it. I use it a couple times a day, and I wouldn't want people to make that their only source of protein. The body craves variety. And so don't make that your source of protein at every meal every day. That's just not a good idea. You got to go out there, eat some grains, eat some nuts, do some things to supplement the amount of protein in your diet. But 2 times a day, which is about what I average, I believe in that. It's got enough fiber and other ingredients to keep the body, kind of working the way it's supposed to.
Okay, thank you very much, Eddie. Very
Thank you,
informative
Perry, for
today.
having me. Yeah.
Let me share
Glad
this
to
with
be
Thai
here.
people too. Yes, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that part.
Yeah, I will share what we are talking now to Thai people too, because I have my own channel in Thai. It's very, very useful to share with Thai people for them to know all
Well,
this.
I love it. And listen, I think I've mentioned this to you before. In July, we're going to start direct shipping to Thailand. So we're going to give them access to all the products. I'm super excited about that. And, someday we won't have global travel restrictions and I can actually travel to Thailand. I don't know if that's next year, but when that day comes, I'll be excited. But before then, we'll just send them products.
Yeah, we'll be lucky to have your products here in Thailand.
Thank you, Perry. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we see you again next time, Eddie. Thank you so much for today. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.